Welcome to the Excellence at Work podcast, where we explore the strategies and best practices that drive business success. I'm Rachel Cooke, COO of Brandon Hall Group and the host of our podcast, along with members of our executive team. In each episode, we'll dive into the latest trends, insights, and real-world examples from some of the most exciting leaders from organizations worldwide. Be part of our journey and learn from the best as we discuss innovative approaches and cutting-edge technologies for talent management, learning and development, leadership, diversity and inclusion, and more. Hi, I'm Rachel Cooke with Brandon Hall Group. I'm the host of our Excellence at Work podcast. Thank you for joining us today. And with me, I am thrilled and excited to have Miss Theresa Zeller, the Global Head of Learning Creation at Merck. She heads up, Theresa is the Global Head of Learning and Development, as I mentioned, covering all of the build, buy, and modify learning experiences across 4 lines of business: commercial, manufacturing, research and development, and general global, including finance, HR, IT, and more. Spanning over 75,000 employees across 120 different countries. So she's got quite a load on her there, and she's just fantastic. I love Theresa. She's always a wealth of information. She's got this energy, this positive energy. She's been a speaker at our events over several different years, and she always is just, I'm just so thrilled when she's joining us and sharing her knowledge and her just her passion. Theresa, tell me a little bit more about you and your background.
Well, thanks, first of all, Rachel. So wonderful to be with you here today, and really investing in the Excellence at Work podcast. I'm delighted to be here. I've always enjoyed the opportunities we have to speak and just dialogue about what's going on in the world of human capital management. A little bit about me. So I discovered my passion. I love that you used the word passion, because that's I discovered my passion for learning my last semester, my senior year in college. So that's going a bit back. I was actually an industrial organizational psychology major, and I took a class called Training in Business. And what I discovered in that semester was that learning and development has an amazing power to be able to change behavior. And changing behavior to really drive performance, whether that's growth for an individual or growth for an organization, which to me was pretty amazing in really thinking about the kind of impact that learning and development can have in a trajectory of an individual's life or an organization's life. It inspired me so much. I went on, got my master's degree, and have been in the field of learning and development for now going on 35 years. So it has been such an opportunity to be in a few different businesses, predominantly healthcare and life sciences, but to really have the opportunity to work through both the commercial side of the organizations. I've had the opportunity to lead manufacturing, learning and development, and now have the opportunity to work across the enterprise, which I think provides us with just such a unique opportunity to partner with our business and really ensure that we can achieve what the business and what their goals are, what they're set out to do.
And you've been at Merck for quite a while, haven't you? How long exactly?
Yeah, my 29th year at Merck.
Wow. That is very, I think, something that is, I think it's quite of an achievement, because I see so many people, and there's nothing wrong with it, kind of jumping around. And I think, though, if you leave an organization too soon, you don't really get to have the greatest impact, because you can't really achieve a lot in just a few years. And yet, we all want to find the right culture. We want to find the right fit. And so sometimes I think people leave too prematurely without kind of, I think really kind of seeing it through and kind of navigating through kind of the bureaucracy. And you do see that when you see people are 2 years here, 2 years there, maybe 1 year, you often think, why, and yet, and again, maybe this is a generational, you know, I think a thing that we see more generationally, though hopefully it's starting to shift. I think our conversation today is around, what does it really mean to run learning like a business? I asked you to join me as we're looking at our HCM business priorities survey and study, and we produce or publish a book on the landscape each year that we have the digital copy as well as a printed copy that we deliver at our conference in January. And this helps us as a research team kind of establish and understand what companies, what they're focusing on, and and what the importance is, and also where do learning and HR professionals need to kind of allocate their time best, or kind of think about what other organizations, how they benchmark themselves to stay competitive, to stay, on top of the best of what they can deliver from a learning or HCM perspective. So I'm really curious to dig a little bit deeper here and pick your brain a little bit about, what's happening at Merck and what, kind of what, from your perspective, how does treating learning and development as a business function differ from traditional approaches to corporate training?
Well, I have to go to the sort of comments you were just making. From a business perspective, it absolutely makes great business to be able to retain your employees. And I think that learning and development is such a value proposition for corporations. With good career development and good and strong ability to build individual and organization capability comes a value proposition to all generations. I always said that I wanted to stay at the organization as long as it was challenging me professionally, as long as I was adding value and having fun. And I've been able to be in very many roles and be able to grow across the organization. And I think from a business perspective, the numbers are pretty clear in terms of what it costs to recruit and hire new talent into the organization. It really pays organizations to grow, develop their talent and build that trust and loyalty in the organization. So I had to go back to that. But I mean, I think that's an important one. So if we've got a pretty important remit as learning and development to build talent in an organization, and I think traditionally, learning and development across industries has gotten a rap for maybe not being as business focused. And so this language always comes in. What does it mean to run as a business? I think it's fairly simple. I think maybe simple to say, harder to do. But the first and foremost, I think it means really being aligned and prioritizing what the business prioritizes. And so, we can't get all introspective. We can't build things because it's awesome. We can't be so pervasive with offerings that people get lost. It's really about what are the capabilities and skills that are going to drive the organization forward? Where are the gaps? How do you identify them? And then how do you make sure that you're really focused on the things that matter most to the business? If I'm working with research labs, what matters most to them is how can I discover medicines more quickly, effectively. If I'm working with commercial, it's about how do I make sure that we're really, truly helping our healthcare providers understand what we do and how our products can fit in the treatment of their patients. If I'm working for manufacturing, it's how do I make sure I'm delivering right first time, on time in full, quickly and with quality and safely. So really understanding what the goals are, and particularly, what they're trying to accomplish, helps us to really organize and think through which skills make the most sense and where do we really focus our effort and energy. It really starts with making sure you're addressing the business problem. And to the degree possible, just like our business partners do, make sure you're doing that in a way that's data driven. Make sure that you're always experimenting, learning, and adapting, and making sure that your practices are the most effective practices. And then really operating with excellence. There are some core things that I make sure that I hold my team accountable to, because just as the business is accountable to KPIs and we are partnered with them to achieve theirs, there are certain KPIs I need to hit as well. And that's, to me, a business mindset. How do you deliver value to the business most optimally?
And how do you start identifying what key performance indicators or metrics should learning leaders focus on to demonstrate business in?
Yeah, so for us, I think the most effective thing is where the business is already measuring and has KPIs for the business. The degree to which you can connect into those is most effective. So whenever we're scoping a body of work with a business partner, we are always asking, well, how are you measuring the successful outcome of this? And so as they measure, so should we. Now, for us, that's impact. What are those performance indicators that they're really working on? Is it reduction in incidents? Is it reduction in discards if you're in manufacturing? Is it increase in sales? Is it increase in, at one point we were, really looking at experimenting heavily in research, but failing fast and moving on to new molecules. So what is it that the business is most interested in? And then how do you do that? From a learning perspective, something we uniquely need to think about is how can we help the business by ensuring that individuals that are decreasing their time to competence. So they're increasing their proficiency, and we're doing it in shorter and shorter amounts of time. So that's something any learning organization, any learning professional should always be thinking about. How can we ensure that folks are getting to that next level and getting there as quickly as possible, as proficiently as possible? How do we ensure that we're helping to retain talent because they can see a career path and journey, which we tend to measure in our pulse survey, our employee engagement. Do you see that you have a career here at Merck? And do you see that we're investing in building that career? So those are some of the KPIs. I personally, in the world of learning creation, or personally, but my team, we're always looking at things like our cycle time, how fast are we building, our quality, and our cost effectiveness. So those are three real tangibles for us in terms of operational excellence that we also measure.
Sure. And are there ways that learning professionals can better align to the overall company's strategy and objectives? And there's a two-part here. Do you find that learning is driving this, or do you find that the business is driving this?
So I always think we, serve at the pleasure, if you will, of the business. The business ought to be driving their objectives. And I think that this is a place where learning professionals, where they can partner with our HR business partners, I think it's a nice triumph, threesome, if you will. When I was actually leading learning for manufacturing, there was very few conversations I didn't have my HR business partners in with me, because learning is part of the overall human capital conversation. And there may be parts of the conversation that require talent acquisition, or it may require other aspects of HR. But hearing that helps me as a learning professional understand what's the unique piece that actually is really critical in terms of capability development and skill development, and how might I bring value to the conversation. So sometimes we think we need to go outside and hire, and sometimes that's absolutely right, and we need to. How might we also think a little bit differently about building that capability in the organization, and what would it take, and how long, how much runtime would it take to build that capability in the organization? So to me, it starts with what are the business problems that the leader is trying to solve, and then saying, okay, so what does that mean you need of the folks that are your performers, your talent in your organization, and then how do you help to get the capability that you need to deliver the business results? So it always starts with strategy. We actually look at it as what's the corporation strategy, what's our talent strategy to achieve that, and then we break from there. What's our actual learning strategy to support?
And what challenges are you seeing or that organizations are faced with from shifting to a more business oriented learning model? And how can they overcome these challenges?
I think it's a real shift in mindset. I think in a lot of organizations, and we have certainly worked through this transformation and continue to work through the transformation. I think it's a shift in mindset of the folks that are really working with the business. We call them our learning consultants, or some people call them your performance consultants. I think there's a real shift from the order taking, what is it you'd like me to do? And that transactional kind of conversation that leads to a task list that I may feel really good walking away with because I'm really clear about the 5 things you want, sometimes exactly how you want it and what format, versus having a conversation that really gets at your business strategy. What is it you're trying to achieve? What is it that's going to propel you? What is it that's going to get in the way? Do you have the capability you need? What skills are you going to be counting on? Do we have them across the organization? Do you have the bench strength that you need? Those kinds of conversations are really different than what are the 5 training programs you would like this year? What do you want me to focus on for you? So I think that's the biggest shift, and I think the hardest to overcome. I think secondly is probably the right level of sponsorship. So, as you think about trying to drive strategy and trying to drive sponsorship, the higher in the organization that you can get, the more effective you're going to be. So, and then making sure that there's that cascading sponsorship throughout. Oftentimes, I think if learning professionals start too low in the organization, they are going to get the more transactional. That's going to be a lot more, that's going to be more distant from the overall strategy of the leaders. And it might be really cool. It might be important, but it might be incremental versus transformational, and something that's really going to help the business to be really successful. So it's the little bites instead of being able maybe to take a real leap for the organization, which I think we would all agree the greater the impact we can have with the least amount of effort, I think is a huge win for the organization. And then I think we still struggle. And I mean, as long as I've been in learning, I think we still struggle with really measuring effectively to make sure that we can help the organization to understand the value that we can bring, did bring, but how do we measure to say, yeah, you needed this. This is where we were going. And let me show you what we've done. And as in partnership together, let me show you where the skill level is in your organization now and how that correlates to the outcomes that you're seeing as a business.
And especially at the level of your size organization and the scalability of your programs, and to be able to then bring that back to or tie into those KPIs, I'm sure that must be a ongoing effort that and a lot of consideration. And then you have all these new modalities, right? And the technology continues to evolve, and with especially now with AI, the level of production is increasing. That's great though, but then how do you tell us a little bit about your how your team is integrating AI into your strategy and operations of HCM, and then how are you managing that from an impact standpoint?
Yeah.
or
So,
is it too early?
well, no, we're actually doing a lot of experiments. So, we have seen, like, we did some of the low hanging fruit. We're very fortunate that we have our own generative AI. So that helps tremendously because it does keep pulling and growing its knowledge of our organization. And it's, you feel much more comfortable, confident in the confidentiality of your work, given that it's inside the organization. So we've been able to leverage our internal generative AI to do things like reduce the cycle time of video scripting, of some content scripting, because we can, and even in building assessments for either whether they're pre-assessments or post-assessments, been able to say, prompt, here's the content. What's the best 3 questions we can ask to see if somebody really understood it? And that just really helps reduce the time on our designers developers, which is awesome because the demand's high on them. We've got quite a backlog. So by moving some of that scripting more quickly, we can spend our time on some of the more strategic stuff up front, and moving the solutions, the learning solutions through. So we've seen, I would say on average, about 40% reduction in time when we've been able to use our generative AI in
Nice.
order to do that kind of scripting, which, you
Great.
always have to review it. You always have to make sure but it's a great start for our subject matter experts. I mean, you think about taking a subject matter expert off the line, out of the lab, away from the customer, and being able to do that much and then just have them respond versus having to start from scratch. That's huge. That's a
Sure.
value to our subject matter experts. That's probably where we've seen the most value. We've got experiments. We actually put into place what we're calling a practice circle. And because there are so many opportunities for us to practice in so many ways, whether it's creation or curation or translation or easy video content, more difficult video content, or looking at simulation, what we're trying to do is make sure that we're learning the lessons and we're quickly understanding them and getting them out to the rest of my designers, developers, and architects. So we've got practice circles and we're really defining the experiments that we're running and then running them and coming back. You can get peer-to-peer review, which is always awesome when you're in the middle of experimenting, but then coming back really rapidly to say, what did we see? And then can we replicate it? Do we see it again in another project? And can somebody do it very similarly and answer the same question? So we are running a lot of experiments and we're hoping that we continue to be able to increase the use of AI, whether it's, any of the 3 buckets of AI, just to be able to bring more value and to enable I would say, our workflow to move even more effectively. The other thing I would say is we're upskilling, right? We're upskilling ourselves as the organization is upskilling on AI. So, we have a AI boot camp, if you will, that helps my team to learn so that we can think about all the ways that we could be more effective. But we're also looking at how do we make that even more effective so we reach more folks and can help the entire organization understand the value that AI can bring in the kind of work that they do.
Would you say that upskilling is one of your key focus areas for going into next year around looking at HCM priorities?
For sure. As we start really looking at what it's going to take to continue to be, a leader in biopharmaceuticals, it does mean that you're always looking ahead to say, what are the leadership capabilities that are going to be important? What are the digital capabilities that we're going to need to continue to grow in and thrive in? So we're really focusing heavily in building a skills currency that will allow us to more effectively get at the skill underneath the capability, because we believe that's transferable in roles and across the organization and understandable. it also helps us to understand what skills do we have in the organization, so that as we look to make choices about, do we need to bring skills into the organization? Do we have skills? How far away are we from developing a certain skill? Are we at a foundational level? We need to be at a much more advanced level. So helps us to really start to understand, do we have the capability we need to be successful? So it's a huge focus for us, for sure.
What other areas do you anticipate where you feel the learning function or your team will be prioritizing around?
So if I take a very internal look, and look at the learning function itself, we're continuing to build out our technology ecosystem. We're continuing to look at, how do we think we can most effectively help people to access learning, search effectively, have a learning experience that is in one place. And I think we're trying to move the needle from what I think all of us talked about as learning in the flow of work to work as learning and learning as work, right? So how do I learn as I work? And I think AI gives us a great opportunity to do that. I think that we are becoming very rich with technologies. So learning how they fit together and learning, how to enable a really seamless experience so that we really are learning as we're working and not needing to step away so much, I think becomes a huge opportunity for us. So that's a big one. My partner in crime, my partner in technology enablement, and I spend a lot of time together thinking about, how do we just continue to optimize what we have. And even in the AI world, how do we optimize the tools we already have that are chock full of opportunities with AI before we even think about introducing any new tools? So I think that space is really ripe as well. So skills, our technology enablement, and then for the business, I think for the business, we continue to see on our horizon leadership capability, digital capability. So it's the humanity, it's the what can the digital do for us, and how did these come together, as we continue to look at how we compete best in the marketplaces around the globe.
And those are all good, important topics to focus on, and also optimizing what you have. I think that's an element that, especially now, and always have been in some ways, trying to figure out how to do more with less. But you'd be surprised how much you really do have if you reflect and kind of look under the covers deeper and see, what layers are there to be able to really kind of leverage and to optimize. Because oftentimes a lot of technologies go to waste, not necessarily because of the experience or the capabilities, but it's just that they're not, there's a lot of different functionalities that they're not utilizing. And, from a learning area, that gives you an advantage to kind of take an inventory of what you have and see what you may be able to leverage better.
I agree with you. And I think the degree to which we look at this as one human capital practice, so look at it across talent management, look at it across HR, versus these are your learning tools, these are your talent acquisition tools, these are your HR BP tools or talent management tools. I think the more that we can have the data flowing effectively, and I think, again, skills allows you to do that, we could really bring a lot better insights into, how do we support our employees? How do we grow the capability we need to grow? How do we grow careers more effectively? And make really good decisions with a lot less. So, I think a lot of companies right now have such siloed data that you're potentially spending a lot of dollars in a lot of areas, versus if you can have that really optimize that flow. So yeah, I would say consolidation, use what you got in a really smart way.
Right. And looking at HCM as a whole, not in these separate silos can really help elevate help you and be an advantage to you as a leader, as a global leader in at Merck or anywhere, because then you're truly looking at the employee, and you're looking at the company, and you're looking at the talent and business needs, and then where does that employee fit in that, along the way, and where, what skills do they need, or what opportunities they need in order to advance, or the successes that they're having, and all of the different HCM functionalities or practice areas. We really can't do one without the other. But as you mentioned, Theresa, having all these different data summaries and separate, pieces of information does make it challenging for the learning professional or HR professional or even the individual to be able to advance or to be as productive. So as we see systems get better and tools get better and the use of them, this will help. And I like to hear, I'm liking what I'm hearing from what you're saying as you're focusing on this, right?
Yeah, and I think jobs are going to spin up that we've never seen before, right? And the traditional jobs are going to start morphing and changing. So the degree to which we can help our folks see those trends and be developing toward them and be really thoughtful about the conversations we have as a full HCM community, I think it's to the advantage, kind of going back to our earlier conversation, it makes really good business sense because it's a whole less costly to retain an individual than it is to bring and search for a new individual. But it's the right thing to do by our talent. And then, it's growing, tremendous, loyalty capital, and it's just growing that potential in the individuals that you've hired.
The last couple of years have certainly set us up for this stage and to be able to prepare us for looking at skills differently and being able to kind of build a model to support that, right? If you probably introduced this concept about 5 years ago, pre-pandemic, in the not necessarily it's a new way of thinking, but in the speed that we're having to address and to shift, we've certainly been on the road or on the path to moving in this direction. So leaders such as yourself I feel in some ways are more than ready, and even though it's a challenging time, I don't want to speak for you, but it seems that you're kind of embracing this change and the speed of change.
It's exciting to me because, it used to be bring folks together in a room. You've got folks now all over the globe. It just is not cost effective to do that. There are some things, and will always be some things that's a great learning methodology for sure. But how do you ensure that you're not disadvantaging someone because they're a remote employee and they have the same opportunity to learn and grow and build their career? I think that's the new challenge post-pandemic that we have as learning professionals. How do we bring learning to all? It's a DE&I focus. It's a how do we make sure that we're advantaging everyone in the same way in building their career, regardless of where they live and operate. And it's exciting that the technology has risen to the occasion and allows us to be able to really solve some of those challenges that we wouldn't have been able to solve years ago.
Sure. Now, do you see, is there still a level of support or a focus on DE&I at Merck? And I'm seeing and hearing a lot of different companies kind of stepping back from making this a priority in relation to a lot of other competing priorities. And there's a few things that that I've noticed, and maybe there's not as many big initiatives as maybe 2 years ago, perhaps because it's more weaved into all of your weaved into your larger strategy of your talent and learning.
Yeah, spot on. I was going to say I mean, we still do have a very vibrant DE&I team function that continues to have very, I think, visible events, learning initiatives. But I do think you're spot on that we've moved to how do you integrate that in the fabric of who we are. It has become a big thread through, if you will, all of our leadership skills, the 15 leadership skills we introduced last year. And so it's almost as if it's not this separate thing that you need to think about in addition to everything else that you're working through and thinking about. It is part and parcel of how we lead. And so I do think from that standpoint, it may not feel as visible, like it doesn't have, because I don't think it's vying for attention anymore. I think our leaders understand the criticality and the importance of ensuring that we truly bring diverse points of view, diverse capabilities together, because we'll get a better solution. And it makes great business sense. It makes great sense from a humanity standpoint. So how do we embed that in everything we do? So I think you're absolutely spot on. You may not see it with like the neon lights that, as you're trying, when you're first trying to get the momentum, but I think it's very much a vital part of the way that we think about working at Merck.
And it was about a year ago, a little bit more than that, when we had our DEI Excellence Conference, and we talked a lot about, and a lot of the conversations we had, a pretty robust agenda. And the common theme was, how do you embed it throughout? And I think that was the biggest challenge that DEI professionals shared, and also I think focus for them. And and I'm seeing that has continued to have a greater shift in how leaders are thinking about and integrating and incorporating those elements in around inclusion and belonging.
And it's continual education, right? But it's also, how do you shift some of the systems and the processes so that you're not disadvantaging in any potentially, unintentional way, but how do you make sure that your systems and processes are enabling that? So even as we have been working through our leadership skills and capabilities in the organization and building our leadership capability, it's what does that also mean for our talent processes, and how do we ensure that that's embedded there as well? So it's the people part, the process part. How do we just make sure that it's truly embedded in word and action in the way that we do things?
Yes, indeed. And also wanted to recognize and we've already celebrated your organization in 2023, but you did win 8 HCM Excellence Awards. And so as we're going into 2024, I'm excited about what this year brings. I hope you'll be able to join us again in 2025 at our conference. As I mentioned, you're just, I think a wonderful speaker, and you, it's not just presenting, but you really share what you believe in, and you exuberate, the passion and your experience of your, your profession in the industry. So, thank you for joining me today, and thank you for sharing, your experience and your priorities that you're focused on. And thanks again, Theresa. Until next time, have a great week.
Thanks. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Really enjoy the time.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.